I am Cliff Albright, co-founder, executive director of Black Voters Matter. And again, thank you. We're going to give folks a minute to continue logging in. But we want to thank you for joining us on this very special webinar where we're going to be talking about everything that's going on in what some of us call Douglas Commonwealth, what some of us call soon to be the 51st state, what most people know as Washington, D.C. And of course, you all know what's going on in the headlines, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about it, and we're gonna have some special guests joining us to do so. But let me just first frame for those of you, many people who are tuning in now who signed up were originally signing up for a webinar and a teaching that we were going to be doing on Letter from Birmingham Jail as part of a series that we're doing in partnership with the King Center, because we believe that in the times that we are in, that while there are many tactics that we need to be taking, phone calls and texting and door knocks and arts and culture and all that, that somewhere in there, there's got to be direct action and especially some form of civil disobedience. But we are also clear that we can't just jump into that, right? Because we are in very dangerous times, right? And we know that there have been people who have been trying to set us up and taunt us and pull us into that because they want to have the image of Black folks in the streets. And so part of what we've been saying is that we need to be grounded in the background and the science and the rationale and the tactics of direct action and civil disobedience. So we've been doing this series with the King Center, and that series will continue, and we'll be doing the next segment of that will be taking place in September 25th. And that one will be followed by future ones in October as well as in November. So continue to look on our, sign up for our emails, our text blast, check our website, our social media, so that if you're interested in that series, that you can get plugged in and you can go on and register in advance. But today we are talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C. And thank you. You see people who are joining in from all over the country. And in fact, I see somebody who just commented from Spain. We taking this global, y'all. We taking this Pan-African, y'all. So, and that's the kind of energy that we're gonna need in the struggle that we are in right now. So we'll be talking about all of that. In just a minute, we're going to be joined by our good friend, our good sister comrade, Nene Taylor. If you've seen any of the videos that have been put out there about some of the protests and rallies and press conferences taking place in DC, you've probably seen this sister's face because she has been all over. She and her team, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, which is a part of the wider Free DC coalition, and we want to hear more about Harriet's, and we want to tell y'all how y'all can get plugged in and support Harriet's Wildest Dreams. So hopefully we'll be able to share a link to support them later on. But we're going to be bringing Nene on in just a minute. We'll also be joined by our good friend, sister Conrad Anisha Hardy, coming from the great state of Alabama, because again, part of this discussion is going to be about how what's happening in DC is not just about DC. We want to support our fam in DC. Just that's enough, right? Because they need our support, because the 700,000 residents in DC need our support, because the denial of voting rights to DC is one of the oldest versions of voter suppression. So it's enough to support DC just for that. But we also have to recognize that this is a part of a strategy that they are trying to bring to our cities all across the country. They're already talking about Chicago, right? They already been talking about, in fact, already sent troops to LA. We know that they're targeting Baltimore, right? And so we all have to be, as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is certainly a moment where that is applicable. So we're going to be talking about all of that, the national implications, maybe even the global implications. But again, this is about, you all know the deal, the menace who's in the White House, federalizing law enforcement in DC, trying to take over the DC police, sending all these agencies to DC, and then sending National Guard to DC, and not just the regular National Guard that DC usually controls, but also basically getting these other states. I believe the number is now six other states that are sending or have sent National Guard troops to DC. So all of that sounds horrible, right? But there's work going on in the district. And so at this time, I want to bring in again my good friend and sister Nene Taylor, so that she could give us a little bit more, color in that picture a little bit more for us about like what it's really been like on the ground. I hear that there was a rough night last night, and maybe she'll talk a little bit about that, but talking about both the challenges that they're facing on the ground, as well as talking about the organizing that's been taking place and how we all can plug in. So let me turn it over to Nini. Nini?
Hey, thank you, Cliff. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for allowing me to speak about what's happening in DC as someone who's organizing on the ground. And as you all see stories on the internet, I'm literally in the mix on the ground with the people. As Cliff stated, I am a co-founder of the Free DC project, which was given I was given the blessing to carry the torch of what let our legend, Honorable Murray Burry, mayor for life, started back in the 70s. And so it was about DC home rule. And so I got to get First Lady Corbury blessing to continue the legacy of Free DC, because Free DC is definitely is enslaved. And when we tell people that DC is enslaved, it's because DC is not a state. And a lot of people don't understand that DC is not a state. And because we're not a state and we're only the United States capital, Congress has a right. Once we do our legislation at our local Wilson building where we got our council members and our mayor, anything we do there have to go through Congress, and Congress have to sign off. They be like, yeah, you can have this money. Yeah, this bill can pass. And so that's like, oh, you all Congress people minding DC business and telling us what we need in DC, and that what we don't need in DC. And right now, because the Senate and the House is Republican, we're struggling because they literally want to federalize DC and just take home rule completely away from us and just run DC. The menace, the Orange Man, want to run DC as his kingdom. Um, and so, with that being said, he has actually brought in over 2,300 guards, and he's expecting to bring more on Monday. The good part at first, these National Guards didn't have guns, but the ones that's coming on Monday, they will be carrying M7s, and they have arresting power. And so this is very very scary for us. Like I said, this weekend the National Guards were there more like they wasn't in riot gear. They was just there to help the other law enforcement that's in our city, which is a lot of federal policemen. We have DA, ATF, Homeland Security, ICE, the U.S. Marshals, who you name who and let's name that DC already have 32,000, I mean over 32 law enforcement agencies already in our city. So we were already over police, so imagine him sending more police. So right now we have policemen for like every 100 people, and with that we're experiencing the Jim Crow day and Emmett Till days for black people. Hers Wildest Dreams, which I'm the executive director and co-founder, is a black-led organization. We're abolitionist organization, so we do court watch. And I literally just got the court watch sheet from my people yesterday, and we're watching it today to see who was locked up. We're locking people up for sitting down in their yard eating crab, not their yard, but outside, like you know how black people hang out eating crabs with a beer. He literally got locked up because he had an open container. We got people being locked up for smoking a joint because it's decriminalized, but it's against the law to smoke on the streets. We got people locked up for fare evasion. And that means not paying your fare, and that's supposed to be civil disobedient, not criminal. But these law enforcement agencies that he bringing, they're lawless. They don't care, and they literally like attacking and causing mass incarceration of our people here in DC. They're kidnapping us. They're literally kidnapping us off the street. Just like Cliff said last night, I had to go up U Street because they were on U Street just the littlest thing. They just snatching people up. And the sad part is we are watching them go to jail so that Trump can get his numbers. But a lot of those cases are getting no paper. When I say no paper, they've been dismissed. But it still give him the power to say, yeah, I'm cleaning up DC. You see how many people we locked up, but no one is talking about how many of those cases were thrown out. And this is what I've been asking the media to do. I want y'all to talk about how many cases were thrown out. Like Cliff just saw, one of my organizers literally got arrested because we do cop watch, and we were watching the kids because we have a curfew zone. Kids got to be in the house by 11 o'clock. Some areas that where gentrification is happening, all the white people live, they got to be out of their area by 8 o'clock. Come on now. Come on now. Let's just think about where we at. They're telling kids to be in the house at 8, don't come in this area after 8 o'clock at night. And so the kids don't know, and the kids not listening. And we can't tell our kids how to move in one day, right? And so we're struggling with our youth of not wanting to obey the master's rules, right? So three of the kids, and DC kids ride the metro for free. So you really don't even have to lock the kids up because they got metro cards if they go to school and they ride for free anyway. But what Marta and everybody is beating their chest, even our racist MPD police department, trying to be like, no, we got this, we tough, and we don't need them. So they're compliant. This is their chance to actually enslave us even more. Because, as y'all know, we fought for defund the police back in 2020. So a lot of cops are really upset that, a lot of their rude or a lot of their abuse got turned around, so they don't get back. And so in the process of her trying to like save the youth and ask, what's your mother name? Can I call somebody? One of the police officers who was a sergeant literally grabbed her, threw her down, pepper sprayed her in the face. And it was really unlawful. And so we were able to kidnap her back because he actually didn't know who he snatched that day. But we can't get everybody, and we can't save everybody, and we don't have the resources to save everybody. But our goal is to try to keep as many people from out of the cages as possible. But it's really, really bad right now. And for black people are afraid. And we at a point, just like Cliff said, we gotta look back of what did our ancestors do? Because I know that our ancestors went through something worse, but because white people are now impacted, they have a lot of energy, right? And they trying to organize and just do whatever. But I'm fearful of that because what they do impacts black and brown people, right? And so yeah, I'm just reaching out to the black community and trying to figure out what this look like, what resistance look like in a way that we can actually keep each other as safe as possible, but actually take a stand to let them know, get out of our city. We don't need you. We can govern ourselves. And it's a fight. And he's threatening Mayor Bowser, saying if she don't stop lying, he's gonna go. He's gonna take federal. He's gonna take the city, and she's not lying. But we all know that he's a liar. We all know that he's a pedophile. But and right now he owns the media, so it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. So that's where we at in DC. But we are organizing and building a resistance where we're trying to get 20 at Free DC Project. We're trying to get at least 25,000 people because we know if we get that many people, we're saying we're not going to comply, but we got to build that people power so that we don't have to comply. And with that being said, we're doing different things. We have on the 28th, we have a get out our city march at DuPont Circle. We got over 30 people signed on, 30 organizations to sign on just to make a rally to ask them to leave our city. And on the 26th, on September the 6th, we literally have a national march that's coming, which I really want to tap into black communities, the black organizations and the national organizations that come, because right now it's union led. Um, and yeah, it's kind of interesting where we're going with this, right? But I do know that black people have to be careful how we move because we don't have as much privilege as white people in this time. And so it's kind of scary. And then on the fourth, we're doing labor. We're going up because you all Congress people come back. So we are lobbying on Capitol Hill at Congress, asking people to visit their congressperson and fight back and don't allow him to extend the time that these people get to stay in our city. So we right now like asking our national allies to stand up and reality, we want people, if they can organize the national organizations in a safe way, to start protesting in their city, to like raise awareness of what's going on in DC, especially to the black and brown communities, because white people is moving in privilege. We are impacted. And he figured that we get the black people out the way, then he can authoritarianism and fascism. He can just run his country. And that's the end goal. But he have to get the resilient black people out of his way. And so his next stop, he said, is Chicago. So if he can
Hmm.
control us and be like, got y'all, he's coming to your state, your state, your state, wherever black people have a democratic state. And so the goal is to like we got to turn the Senate in the House. Because if we don't, it's gonna be a problem. We fighting
Right.
against the devils right now.
Right. And so, and that gets into the whole other discussion around like, the electoral strategy and, like you said, control the House, which touches on a whole nother battle that we've been in around redistricting in Texas and California. We'll have a whole nother webinar to talk about that whole thing. But let me ask you two real quick questions because I know you gotta run. One, you mentioned the days of action that are coming up. I think you said there's one on the 26th
The
and
28th.
the 28th. Okay. And so would it be, in addition to like trying to get people to come to DC, for those people that can't come to DC but still wanted to show their support, is it part of the hope that people in whatever state they're in, whatever city that they're in, that they do like solidarity actions like on the same day, same time, so that we can show that there's this wave of support all across the country?
Yeah, and especially on September the 6th, if the people can't make it to the national march, because that date, that sixth date is huge. That's when he's going to try to extend and keep these people in our city. So right now they're working on the a permit because it's really unlawful. Yeah, we everything we're doing on DC streets because hoping that MPD, which I've been doing, because I've been out there, but I'm intentional on doing things on DC streets. And the chief of police, she know it's me, so I've been safe. But as soon as we tap across the street, which we have to be careful, if I go into a park and try to have a rally or on federal property, they're gonna snatch me. They want me gone. So I'm really moving in a strategic way we're trying to do everything within DC streets because the laws are intact, but they're moving lawlessly. But if I'm on DC streets, they have to go through MPD to do anything to us. So we are doing our First Amendment press conferences and rallies on DC streets, but the National March we're trying to do on DC streets, but also let them know we're going to try to do it permitted, so that people can come in and support that National March. And if they can't, we can actually that's called Burry calling me now. we can actually people can just have it on the same day in solidarity with Free DC Project. And the reason that I don't do Her Wildest Dreams, which because I just said Her Wildest Dreams is a black-led abolitionist organization. So imagine if I try to run this under Her Wildest Dreams name and tell people to do all this work under a black organization that's abolitionist. And so I'm like the secret weapon for Free DC Project. But I actually
Mhm.
let the white lady and our brown executive director Kaya kind of be the face so that I can just stay safe because her tummy never got caught and she never lost a passenger.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, and we gotta make sure that the same thing happens or doesn't happen, for our modern day versions of Sister Harriet. And you are certainly walking in those footsteps. Speaking of which, how can folks support? We know that there's some fundraising efforts for Free DC and we certainly support that. But we also want to be very clear that we want to get some support directly to Harriet's Wildest Dreams. So, where should people go? What's your website for Harriet's, and how can people make a donation?
Yeah, so it's at harrietsdreams.org. You can go to our website because it's true, because I don't speak the name of Harriet's Dreams. So Free DC getting all the money, but I'm in the hood doing know your rights training with the kids and feeding the kids at night, but using my own resources. And actually on the ground, like I just said, we're on the ground, Harriet's Dreams, but Free DC, because everything I do, even if I'm on TV, I say the Free DC Project, co-founder of Free DC. So a lot of Free DC is the one that's getting all the donations, but they're not the heart of the movement, to be honest. And it's just like how yeah, we've been here before. You know how
Hmm.
the black people always be they always I don't have to say it. You all understand. So I'm really talking to Cliff Chucks, trying to see how we can send, get donations over to hurriedstreams.org because we literally getting our people out of cages. And our work didn't start today. Our work been continuous and it's going to continue after this moment because Hurried's Wildest Dreams and Free DC is not a moment. It's a mobilization. It's a 5-year campaign. And what people don't understand, we've been through what they're going through. And so people just rushing, 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 and like I said, white energy trying to find out what to do. But they got to realize that the black people, we still got to fight when all this is over, because they coming for you, they coming for our people, and they want to enslave us again. So it's imperative that people understand that our work is not going to stop after September,
That's
right?
right. Can't
No,
stop, won't
we bail
stop.
people out. We have a court watch program. Like I just said, my court watch team is getting on court at 1 o'clock to see who they locked up today. That didn't start
Mm,
last week or 2 weeks ago.
that's
We've been
right.
doing that for 4 years now, 5 years now.
Mm,
So the work been
mm,
continuous. The court watch team and everything. It's just that we're more activated and just don't have the resources to hold all the people because we didn't have this problem.
that's right. That's right. Well, we put the link in the chat. Says learn more, and it's got the link for harrietstreams.org. There's two questions from the audience. One that I think we'll get to when we talk about the mobilization and the call to action. Somebody wants to know, how do you advise white folks who want to support your efforts? We'll talk about that when we talk about the call to actions. The second question, I think, is a clarifying question specifically for you. Did you say black kids aren't allowed in white areas after 8?
Ex- ex- Gentrification is exactly correct. So what
Hmm.
they do a curfew. Like man, it's on U Street. And if you all know, U Street, the curfew right now is U Street, right? And it's the Navy Yard is where, it's where gentrification is. And yeah, so no, they got to be gone. So they do a curfew. We have 11 o'clock curfew where they got to be off the streets, period, by 11 o'clock. Up to that 17 and under 17 and under have to be off the streets by 11 o'clock at night every day. On and when kids are somewhere hot, which they call hot because it's a gentrification neighborhood, they have a right to do emergency curfew. And so the emergency curfew this weekend is U Street. So from Thursday until Sunday until Monday morning, no youth under the age of 17 and under is allowed on U Street, the U Street quarter, which is a lot of part of U Street in like 5, 10 blocks on U Street after 8 o'clock at night. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's real. And no youth can be anywhere in DC after 11 o'clock, but at your house, sitting on your porch.
Right. Right. And just as we've seen, as many people have noted, even in the chat, people have noted, there's a long tradition of this, of basically just it's our blackness, which is the crime, right? It's our blackness that becomes the claim for them to be able to stop us or detain us or arrest us. It was the black codes, during the slavery era that like if you didn't step off the sidewalk as a white person was coming, then that could be grounds of you, getting arrested, or if you dared to look them in the eye, or any number of reasons that they would use that as grounds. It's just a continuation of all of that. So we thank you for everything that you're doing. We're going to keep on lifting up the work of Harriet Streams as well as Free
Free
DC.
DC Project, and that's where we have the occupation. So if you go to Free DC Project and you go to the word occupation, you can see everything that's going on and what we're working on to try to stop. Because right now, Congress, we have like 12 riders where these Republicans have putting in bills to get passed. Like one Republican has a bill to literally take home rule for us, and they have the authority to do that. But we just praying things don't pass in the Senate because they don't need Mayor Bowser or our council people to change a law. They can just, a Republican from your state can be like, oh, and get somebody to support them. Oh, I want to change this law in DC. And if it passed through Congress, they can do it. And so right now they got someone to have a law where 14-year-olds get to get charged as adults if they commit a crime. So that's one of the laws that's in Congress right now that's waiting for them to get back to vote on. They just evil people. And so
Hmm.
we have to run up there and get support and ask people who don't know anything about DC. And if they want to like do something for DC, come get our potholes or fix the communities that need support. But yeah, I got a lot of work for them, but they don't want to do the work we need, right?
Right, right,
So yeah,
right.
if you follow freedcproject.org, that's where all of our information is. We put up what we're doing every day, uplifting and keeping up with what's going on. So I'm looking forward to, working with Cliff and them with Black Voters Matter. So we can get more black people involved, especially nationally, how they can support us. And get the Black voices out there because our voices are silent because DC is not Chocolate City anymore, but it's gonna be Chocolate City for me forever because I'm a DC native. Um,
Hmm.
and so it's a lot of white people that's never organized before, and they organize in real white, and it's unsafe for Black
Hmm.
people.
Right. All right, and that's a whole conversation in itself around how do we
Yeah,
organize in times like this. And we're going to touch on some of that. We could stay and talk to you all day, but we know
I
that
know.
you got stuff that you got to be doing
I
there.
do.
So we're going to let Sister Nene go, and we're
Yeah.
sending you all the love and
Yeah,
energy and
and
positivity
Cliff,
that we
make sure you
can.
share my email with the folks if they might want to reach out, you know. Yeah, and thank you all for like taking space for us and want to be in the solidarity with us because we definitely need everybody. It's gonna take all of us to save us and we keep us safe.
That's right. We keep us safe.
Yeah.
365. Thank you, Nene.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. So you heard Nene talking about it. We got the links in the chat, harrietstreams.org. We got the link to freedcproject.org. We got the links to some direct actions that they've got going on right now, including you heard Nene talking about the termination resolution. There's an actual bill in Congress right now. Congress can end this takeover. They can end this federalization of the law enforcement. We know that we don't have a lot of faith in this Congress, right? But there's still a way that if we push hard enough, there's only like a 3-4 vote gap in Congress, right? And so if we push hard enough, even getting some of these because even some of these Republicans that are in the DMV area, right, in Maryland and in Virginia, they're feeling pressure from some of their constituents, even their Republican constituents, right? And so if we push and we make enough phone calls, we can make something happen, right? And so we got the links on there to the phone calls for the termination resolution. And the other call to action that we have going on right now is around these National Guard that are there from these other states, right? In those states, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, West Virginia, Ohio, potentially any minute or any day now, maybe Alabama, right? And so we've also got links on there so that people can call their state folks in those states. Or so if you're on this call right now from any one of those 7 states that I just mentioned, go check out those links that we got. Go check out those calls to action. Make those phone calls so that we can try to get those folks to get those governors basically to recall those National Guard. South Carolina ain't got no business sending National Guard while they got a hurricane bearing down on them, or while we got any of these other issues in any of these states that National Guard people could actually be doing some good on, but they over there just obeying Cheeto Mussolini over there in DC. And so there are things that we can do with those phone calls, but we also recognize that, and I've said this before, we are not going to phone bank our way out of fascism, right? We are not going to text our way out of fascism. That we've got to use all of the tools that are in the toolbox, all the organizing tactics that we have, including, again, as we keep saying, direct action on the ground, civil disobedience, and all that. And so, speaking of those state actions, again, we've got our good friend Anisha Hardy, who's on the call with us, who's in Alabama. Alabama Values is her organization, and so we're gonna bring on Anisha so she can talk about like what's going on. Talk even for a minute, just let us know like what Alabama Values does, but talk to us about like y'all's view of what's going on in DC and what actions y'all are doing to support our fam in DC right now. Anisha.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Cliff and the Black Voters Matter family for even pulling this conversation together. This is what it's about. Like, we have to, I say real change happens when everyday people get together and say enough is enough. History has shown us that. So thank y'all for that. So my name is Anisha Hardy. I'm the executive director of Alabama Values and Alabama Values Progress. We are C3, C4 communications organizations, grassroots communications organizations. And so my work sits at the intersection of culture, politics, and media. I believe that leveraging narrative and messaging, these are tools to expose injustice, to shift public opinion, and to build power for our communities that are often pushed into the margins and ignored and silenced. And so this perspective really grounds how I see what is happening right now and why I believe, language matters as much as policy when it comes to protecting democracy and protecting our people, especially when, we're hearing like Stephen Miller, the chief of staff, saying that DC is a predominantly Black space and therefore a violent space. This is not only racist, it really shows how race is being deliberately conflated with crime and danger to justify what is happening in DC. And Sister Nene, before she left, she talked about how she's trying to get the media to really talk about this in a way so folks understand what's happening. And one of the things that we're noticing a trend where the media, is calling what is happening in DC as unprecedented, but saying that this is unprecedented is tone deaf at best. Like for Black and Brown communities, the use of policing as a tool of control and suppression, this has deep centuries, long precedent. Like the role of policing in this country has never been neutral, y'all. Policing began in the 1700s with slave patrols, designed to capture and control enslaved Africans. After emancipation, police forces evolved, to enforce the Black codes and Jim Crow laws and targeting the freedom movement of Black people. And then, we fast forward to, the 20th century, where policing was used to suppress the civil rights movement with dogs, fire hoses, and batons, really deployed against peaceful protesters. And then later, the law and order politics, and we're hearing that word a lot, right? Law and order politics fuel the mass incarceration, the targeting of Black and Brown communities under the guise of safety. So understanding this history is essential, because what we're seeing in DC is not new. It is a continuation of a system that is rooted in control, not care, not protection for our people. So for decades, politicians have relied on this so-called law and order, dog whistle. This is coded language. And I think it's important for us to name this. This is coded language that has historically and today we are seeing it stir racial fear, to strengthen white supremacy and anti-Black tactics while pretending to be about safety. This echoes Nixon, Reagan, and countless moments where we've seen this whole racialized fear and information being weaponized to really mobilize, white voters against their own interests. And so, this really connects directly to, the expansion of troops. As Cliff mentioned, like there are other states. There was an article that was posted yesterday, and I dropped those states in the chat where, there's planning to expand this across 19 states, including Alabama and many states across the South. And I want to be clear that the coordinated attacks happening, in predominantly Black cities and also across the South, where we have a lot of states with Republican-led supermajorities, meaning that their state legislators on both sides of the aisle are overwhelmingly, Republican. This is intentional, because the South holds the highest concentration of Black and Brown folks, the highest concentration of other marginalized communities, immigrant communities, LGBTQ plus communities, all of these communities, right? So this is the coordinated attack that's happening across the South. This is intentional. And so if we don't recognize this as part of a long pattern, that we won't be able to call this out and disrupt it. We must name it for what it is, y'all. A continuation of white supremacy rhetoric and anti-Black tactics that have been used to divide us and conquer in this country. And so I believe that, who controls the narrative controls the power. And so, it's important. And I also want to name, Nene mentioned that, in this movement, it is now these anti-Black tactics are now impacting other groups. It's impacting, it's also impacting white folks. And so there is there's a desire to rally around this and organize. And so, but also what I'm saying, because some of these groups who are rallying around this, they also carry with them privilege and proximity to power, to not be disproportionately impacted by the intersectionality of these issues, because this is bigger than just the control that we're seeing. We can tie this to the quality of lives of Black and Brown folks across this country. So, I'm seeing mainstream media pivot from the root cause and not naming this issue for what it is. And they're pivoting and talking about things like tariffs and Medicaid cuts. But that does not meet the political moment. Because when we pivot to more tangible issues, we unintentionally reinforce Trump's administration's framing instead of challenging the foundation. And the root cause here is the manufactured crime, panic. It is the weaponization of policing. Both are deeply connected to how authoritarianism takes hold. History has shown us that. And so by avoiding it, we fail to equip our people with the understanding that they need to connect the dots across the issues. Knowledge is power. I heard that a lot growing up, and the older I get, the more I understand that one of the ways that you keep communities disempowered is by, creating barriers to information about the power that they have, about who has the power to impact their quality of lives, or the issues that are sitting right at their front door. And so, instead of pivoting, I'm encouraging folks that as you talk to your communities, because you all are trusted messengers, in the community. So, as you talk to, your neighbors' neighbors, or at your kitchen table, we got to get back to having these kitchen table conversations, y'all. Like, ground this message about what's happening in history. Remind folks that policing has always been used to control marginalized communities, not to protect them. Call out, the dog whistles that folks are hearing, in the media. Explain how law and order, rhetoric has historically been used to scare voters back into backing harmful policies. And connect this to the broader fight for democracy. Like, frame this as part of a bigger authoritarian playbook where, this manufactured crises is justifying this overall power grab that we're seeing on our brothers and sisters, in DC. And also recenter, community safety, really lift up what true safety comes from. Like, whether it's healthcare, housing, education, opportunity, not federalized policing, and what we're seeing, and racialized terror that we're seeing happening in DC. And so we also must remember the power of public opinion. I do want to name that. And I think, Sister Nini is wise in saying, I'm trying to get the media to really talk about this, because historically, the media has been used to delegitimize movements that have pushed against the status quo of society. And so we have a responsibility to push back against those pervasive narratives that are out there. I mean, think about it. During the civil rights movement, shifting hearts and minds was just as critical as changing the laws, y'all. Images, stories, and testimonies that move the nation to act. And so today we carry that same responsibility, and to really leverage narrative and messaging in a way that awakens, as King talks about, the moral conscience, right? Exposing injustice and really galvanizing the collective. And so, I think in order for us to build the people power that we're calling for in DC and across the country, we have to build what I call ideological power. And ideological power is the public's perception about what they believe is possible. Because without it, we leave space for these harmful narratives, these false narratives to dominate. And so building ideological power, that means shaping how people really understand the power that they have, how people understand safety, democracy, and justice, and ensuring that those understandings are rooted in truth and history. And that's why this teaching, this briefing that we're having today, is so important. And so I don't know, Cliff, if we going to get right into some like direct action, because there are some things that we're talking about here in the state, and I can go there or I can pause because I want to make
No,
sure I'm. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I think it would be good to talk about like some of the things being discussed
Yes. Yes.
in Alabama. I think that would be good both for people who are on here from Alabama, but also again anybody from any of those other states and that might be thinking about, how do we bring this home where I live, in Tennessee or South Carolina or whatever. So definitely if you could share like what y'all are thinking about there
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
Alabama, that would be
Okay.
helpful. Before you do though, I just want to piggyback or veggie on what you said about, the connection between what's happening in DC and these issues that we care about, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't care what your issue is. I don't care if your issue is police violence, If it's healthcare and Medicaid expansion or just holding on to Medicaid, if it's food support, SNAP, school food programs, if it's reproductive justice, maternal health, no matter what your issue is, this attack that we're seeing in DC and the wider attack over control of Congress, it impacts whatever it is that we want to do on any of those issues that we care about. If your issue is about, jobs and employment, about the 300 over 300,000 black women that are now unemployed just over the past 3 or 4 months because of this administration's policies. If that's your issue, then what's happening in DC now needs to concern you. What's happening with Congress needs to concern you. If you, even like you said, if your issue is your potholes, right?
Yep.
If you got troops coming to Chicago, coming to Baltimore, coming to Oakland, who are controlling what our city governments can do, then you're not going to get those potholes filled. You're not going to get anything done, even at the city level. We already know that when our cities try to do some things like increase the living wage, that sometimes it gets preempted by the state governments, right? But now we got the federal government that's going to be coming in and preempting stuff and using federal troops to do it.
Mhm.
So, whatever your issue is, what's happening right now in DC and in Congress, that's your issue as well. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So tell us a little bit real quick about what's going on in Alabama. And again, we got the links in the chat so that people can take actions, these call campaigns. But tell us a little bit about what y'all are thinking about there in Alabama.
Absolutely. Um, yeah. So we've been asking ourselves, what does direct action and civil disobedience look like? Right now, what with, how can we stand with those in DC? But then also learning that this is coming to our state as well. And so I do want to name that, especially since this is kind of like a teaching, right? I do want to name that direct action has always been at the center of like our fight for freedom and liberation. I think it's important to remember that. Whether it's the students who sat down at the lunch counters, the marchers, who face like the dogs, the hoses, the billy clubs, crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, whether it's, young folks, today. I think every step forward came because folks were willing to disrupt business as usual. But however, Dr. King reminded us that nonviolent tension is not something to fear, right? That it is like the pressure that forces this nation to face like the truth that it is trying to hide. And today we're seeing it try to erase. And so it really makes a country that wants to look away really reckon with injustice. And so when we talk about direct action right now, as we've been talking, we're not speaking in the past tense. We're actually speaking about like, okay, what is our duty like in this moment? And to step fully into that tradition to really show up with that type of courage to disrupt like the false, peace that protects oppression and remind like this nation that this, like you said, Cliff, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And so I do want to say that, we believe that our elders carry what we call collective wisdom. These lessons learned, I heard Nini say, turn to the ancestors, right? I often say they left a blueprint. And so, like, that collective wisdom is still here today, like lessons learned from the battles that were fought and in the victories. But then this younger generation, carries collective energy. They carry the creativity, the boldness, the urgency, all that stuff to push us into like new territory as we look at how we address this. And so, we're figuring out like how can we it's not necessarily activating the young folks, but train them, because both are essential. The wisdom and the energy is essential. And that's why, it's critical that we train them and prepare young folks in the principles of nonviolent action, and not as something that just, happened in the past, but as a strategy that still matters in 2025. Because when that wisdom and energy, comes together, movements really transform. And I think from moments of protest into what we can call more sustained power change. And so we've been asking ourselves, what does this look like in 2025? Right. Um, you know, Nene mentioned that the troops that are coming now are going to be carrying guns, not hoses and billy clubs. So what does nonviolent action look like in the face of rage and racialized terror and hate and behind bullets? Like it is possible, it is possible, but we must have honest conversations about what the strategy looks like and being real with folks about the cost. Some of our ancestors lost their lives, giving everything they had in the struggle for freedom and liberation. And their sacrifice is a reminder that the cost of justice has always been high for us, y'all. But it's also proof that change is possible when people are willing to put everything on the line. And so, we're looking at right now, you know, what are some, how do we keep, one, our minds and hearts and our spirits like clear in the face of all of this, of so much trauma, historical trauma, present day trauma. And so we're bringing in the conversation about wellness and mutual aid. Like we're looking at like, how do we unpack this as a community? Also, how do we protect our bodies when we're in the street? So, looking at what does security protocol trainings look like? Looking at how can we pull from some of the lessons of like the nonviolence training and bringing it into present day, because some of the threats, some of them are going to be physical threats, hybrid, digital threats. Sister Nini mentioned that, it's not safe for her in the physical streets or the digital streets. And what I mean by that, y'all, digital streets is, whether it's online attacks that are happening online, or her personal information potentially being leaked. So having a crisis communications plan is something we're pulling together. Having a crisis field plan is something that we're pulling together. Who are our, legal organizations on standby? Where are we having our training pockets across the state? And how do we make sure that our, safety is ingrained like within the collective, that no one feels isolated in this struggle. So right now, this is about planning and being strategic. Right now there are so many issues going on, and we know that that's by design also, because they want to stretch thin to where we can't think, can't plan, can't strategize. And that's not the case here, because we realize that on one hand, our ancestors left a blueprint, and history also teaches us what is coming. And so on the other hand, we know that we need to pause, reflect, debrief, and come up with a proactive playbook on how we're going to address the inevitable and what is coming. And so that's where we are in the state, and having conversations like this, and also with our regional brothers and sisters, across the South. And what does a coordinated field plan look like? What does a coordinated messaging plan look like? My organization recently launched our Southern Narrative Project, and we're having conversations. And that project pulls in our cultural organizers, it pulls in our policy folks, it pulls in our creatives and influencers. Because I want to make it clear that in our movement, when we look at the Black liberation movement in the freedom struggle, it wasn't just people with these titles. It was everyday folks involved, right? It was our culture makers, our entertainers. It was folks with influence. It was our academics, our scholars, our researchers. They took an interdisciplinary approach to how they did, to building like the civil rights movement. And so we're looking at how can we revitalize that and come up with a playbook, so that we're not reacting in the entire moment, that we have some proactivity, some strategies, some proactive strategies in place.
And how do we
And I
pull
did want to
on?
name, oh, and I did want to name one thing. And I'm sorry,
Mm,
I didn't have the link with me, but we actually have a messaging guide that kind of unpacks that, and some of the things that I mentioned, that has a more liberatory narrative messaging framework for how Black folks can talk about this to Black folks, and also, white folks, so how we can talk about what is really happening at this moment. And I'll make sure to
right.
share that with you all to share out.
Great. And we'll share that out. And we'll share out some other resources. We were going to have some resources on know your rights, because that's an important part of this discussion around direct action and particularly civil disobedience. Like just being clear about what your rights are. And sometimes it's a little bit challenging because what your rights are really often depends on where you are, like geographically. Different cities, different states have different policies in regards to, video, videotaping, officers as they're engaging with people, or just even just different policies around, what constitutes stop and frisk. There are some things that are obviously constitutional, and so when we do the general know your rights, we're usually talking about, okay, what are the constitutional rights that apply no matter what city or state that you're in. But we'll have some of those resources available because even in DC right now, there are some amazing groups, some of our legal partners that are doing great Know Your Rights trainings, advancement projects, been doing some stuff with Free DC. You know, ACLU's got some resources out there, LDF's got some resources out there, Legal Defense Fund, and so we'll share some resources to help be a guide to folks in these states as you're trying to do actions to support people, to support DC, you know, just so that people can have a better sense of like what your rights are and what some good lessons learned are and some good tactics. We've seen in some cases some successful tactics around when people, you know, gather around in their video and when they challenge some of these law enforcement, they're not even law. I don't want to call them law enforcement because they're really just thugs and Gestapo and deputized Proud Boys in a lot of situations, right? But basically, you know, calling them out, forcing them to identify themselves. Because if you don't identify yourselves, how we know this isn't just a kidnapping? I'm gonna call the police, or you know, or I'm gonna take action. I'm gonna do a citizen's arrest because from my citizen's perspective, you just kidnapping somebody, right? And
Mhm.
so there's some best practices and some lessons learned that we've seen both in terms of over the past 3 or 4 months, but you know, again, pulling on some of our history, some of our best practices in regards to, you know, in regards to other media. You know, people underestimate the ways that the civil rights movement was very strategic in the way that they would plan
Mhm.
actions, the way that they would time things so that certain marches could make it onto the nightly news, right? And so we know that the media is not our friend, but there is this kind of love-hate relationship and this, you know, kind of strategy that we have to have so that we can get out our messages or get out images. You know, Dr. King and the movement used to talk about we've got to dramatize the
Mhm.
conflict, right? We've got to show the drama. We've got to show the drama that's created by a character, an actor like a Bull Connor, right? Or a Sheriff Clark in Selma. And so, you know, just being strategic about the ways that we plan our actions, the way we implement them, you know, even the way that we work with our allies, making sure like one of the things that we often hear and we've said ourselves is, look, if y'all are looking for us to show up in some of these actions, we can't be on the front line. Because as soon as we're on the front line and police responds a certain kind of way, so how do you tactically use, you know, having, you know, white allies that are going to be on the front lines, and they notice it because even if you listen to, there was a visit that you know, what's his name? Goebbels, Stephen Miller, and what's his name? The little lackey vice president, J.D. Vance did in D.C. where they were going around and touring with the troops. And one of the things that they said, and was very telling, they were mad at the white people.
Mhm.
They
They
were
call them
like, you
hippies.
know, yeah, they call them these hippies. There's these white hippies that are out
Yep.
here, and so they were upset because so many white people were doing the protest so far. But we've got to be careful with that because the other thing that they said is, oh, we don't see black folks at these rallies, and therefore it must be because black folks like having all these troops here. And so again, that speaks to why it's important that we do get involved, that we do
Mhm.
show up so that people are clear that that we are not giving them our permission by not showing up. We are not obeying by not showing up. We've got to send that message to them. We've got to send that message to ourselves. Hell, we've even got to send that message to other countries because one of the things I always say is there are folks globally that want to support our efforts here, but they can't
Yeah.
go any further than we're willing to go,
Mhm.
right? They can't go out on a ledge, you know, to call out the United States if we're not out there and visible. And so it's been, you know, we haven't been sitting around doing nothing for the past black folks for the past 6 or 7 months, right? We've been strategizing, we've been planning, we've been discussing, right? But we're at that moment, y'all, where we've got to take it up another level, right? One of the things we've been encouraging is for everybody to read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail. That's part of the reason why we've been doing these teachings with the King Center because yes, it was written in 1963, but again, there are concepts in there that are just as critical now as they were in 63. The concepts of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The concepts of you know, you've got to view, you've got to know when it's okay to violate an unjust law, right? The whole notion of just laws and unjust laws and what it is that determines when a law is just and when it is that's unjust. There's so many, the concept of time and how some people try to tell you to just wait and how oftentimes wait means never, right? We've waited now for 6 or 7 months since inauguration day, but the time may be now, right? And so, there's a lot of concepts in there. And again, we'll be doing the next teaching on that with the King Center on September 25th. But in the meantime, don't wait on us. Google it, right? Go download a version of it, read the letter, share it with your friends and neighbors, because we have all got to be on the same page. Even those of us who say, look, I'm not ready for that civil disobedience. But what we can't have is some members of our community criticizing it because we're not on the same level with the same background and same grounding, right? So go out and get it, read it, discuss it, join us September 25th. And in the meantime, again, in the chat, we've got all of these links so that you can take whatever action you can take right now. Phone calls to Congress, phone calls to your state, to your governor, if you're in one of those 7 states looking at the National Guards, phone calls telling them, no, bring back our guards. They ain't got no business being in DC. So there are all those actions, and we just posted it again. Support Free DC. Go to freedcproject.org. Support Harriet's Dreams, right? Support these organizations and recognize that even if we get this takeover ended, in the 30 days that it's supposed to end, or even if we get it ended sooner, as Nene said, the wider issues that DC is facing will not be resolved until DC has statehood. And so the support that we're showing in DC now can't just be about the troops right now. It's also got to be about what happens after we get those troops out. How do we put DC on a firmer ground? And again, that's something that our folks in DC need. But guess what? That's something that we need. Because what could we do in Congress? What could we do with Congress if we had an extra voting representative from DC, right, in the House? Right now, they've got a delegate that doesn't vote, Eleanor Holmes Norton, right? She can't vote. What could we do in Congress with that extra seat? What could we do in the Senate with 2 senators from DC, maybe even 2 black senators, right, from DC? How does that change our ability to get action on all the other issues that we care about, which we talked about: healthcare, housing, jobs, schools, student loan, all of that
Mhm.
matters, is why what's going on in DC right now matters to all of us. So we're at 12 o'clock, y'all. Um, I'm just taking a quick look to see if we've got any other questions, any other burning questions in the chat. But this is not the end of the discussion, right? Follow us, social media, Black Voters MTR, Black Voters MTR. If you're in Alabama, if somebody's in Alabama and wants to, or even if you're not, and you just want to find out more, Anisha, about the work of Alabama Values and that narrative work that you do, how can folks connect with you?
Yes, yes, please. Please connect with us at alvalues.org. This is where you'll be able to get some of the messaging resources. And Cliff, I have like 2 minutes to just mention about the letter from the jail. It's the professor in me that want to break down just those points that you mentioned with some practical. Okay, look, I'm the letter. Yes, please, when you leave it, read that letter. It is not just a historical document. It is a roadmap for this moment, y'all. In the letter, he pushed back against those who told him to wait. And he reminded us that I mean, quote, justice too long delayed is justice denied, like Cliff said. And so those just 4 quick lessons. I think the whole justice delayed is justice denied. Urgency matters. I think in practice, folks are like, well, what does that look like? Definitely the calls for actions that we talked about. Don't wait for a better time. There is no better time to organize. There's no better time to respond. So, like, even when you get off this call, you have some actions that you can mobilize around. Also, the point in that letter is that nonviolent tension is necessary to highlight what is happening in this moment. So those sit-ins, really thinking about, like, what does it look like on an everyday sense, whether it is a march or teaching or you hosting a sit-in with your local community, right? And making sure that people can't ignore, like, what is happening. And then neutrality, I do want to name that silence and neutrality, like I was mentioned, it is a choice, y'all. and it sides with the oppressor. So we have to speak up at these meetings, speak up in your church, speak up in the community, like make folks uncomfortable, right? It is time for us to not be neutral. And so, the lessons are in this letter, and it reminds us that we must resist these actions. And so, please tap in with some of these call to actions. Visit us on all social media platforms. ALA Values. We do a lot of visual storytelling and highlighting folks. We're actually going to be highlighting some voices from our BVM family with some digital organizing call to actions around this. And just thank you all. This is a step also. You all attending this teach-in shows that you are committed. So thank you all for this.
So we got thank you, Anisha, so much. We've got your website that you just mentioned and your socials. It's in the chat. Also, to stay following Black Voters Matter, we got that in the chat. You can text us, get on our text list, especially when there's like real quick rapid response information. A lot of times we use our texting mechanism. You can text We Matter, one word to 25225, and that'll get you on our text thing. It also sends some other links on there so that if you want to volunteer or get involved in some other ways, go on and send a text to that link. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, especially as we're talking about Alabama, the Blackest Bus in America is rolling right now as we speak. The Blackest Bus in America is in Alabama because guess what? Even while all this is going on, all the stuff in DC, all the stuff in Texas, all the stuff going on around the country, we still got local elections taking place,
Mhm.
right? And so what's happening right now with local elections in Alabama, that matters too. So the Blackest Bus in America is in Alabama on a 5-day bus tour, right? Including, I think yesterday we were in Anniston, right? Historic Aniston, right, played such a critical role in the freedom rides, right? But we're going to be hitting some other places, including Birmingham, right? So
Mhm.
if you're in Alabama, look for the Blackest Bus in America. If you're in another states, get connected with us because guess what? It may not be this week, but the Blackest Bus in America is probably coming to your state or your city sometime soon. So
Love
y'all,
it.
we got to run. We at
Yes.
12:04. We went a few minutes over. But and this is again the conversation is going to continue because this is an ongoing issue that we're fighting up against. Always remember that Black voters matter, 365, and we fight back. Thank y'all for joining us.